Hello and welcome to Secondhand Stories. This is a place where I tell you stories. What kind of stories? Well, histories, mysteries, and unbelievable histories. Today's story is very interesting. It comes to us from Sri Lanka. Siddhi and I had gone there, and that's where we found this story. The story starts in a cemetery, which is a great place for a story to start. The cemetery is the British Garrison Cemetery in the Sri Lankan city of Kandy. And we were there because someone recommended it to us as a tourist attraction. Now, it's very rarely that you get recommended a cemetery as a tourist attraction. So when you do get recommended it, you go. And we went. And I'm here to tell you, it did not disappoint. So we land up at the cemetery and we meet the caretaker. His name is Harsha. He's in his late 20s, early 30s. Very friendly guy, very informative. And as soon as I met him, I had to ask him the number one question you ask any caretaker of a cemetery, which is, have you seen ghosts? And his answer was, not yet, but I'd like to, which is a great answer. So he's taking us around the cemetery, and the cemetery is filled with stories because every grave contains a story and there are 160 graves. People have found their way into the cemetery in the most odd ways that you can imagine. Everything from getting bitten by a cobra to being trampled by an elephant to getting hit in the head by a cricket ball. All of these reasons have led people to come to the cemetery. As I'm looking around, I see that there's this one particular grave that stands out. It's got this flute-like structure on top. It's bigger than all the other graves. It almost looks like a monument. So I ask Harsha, I said, whose grave is that? And he takes me to it. And he says, this is the grave of John Doyley, the man who brought down the last king of Sri Lanka. And then he tells me the story. And it's a wild story. It is Game of Thrones minus the dragons and set in Sri Lanka. This story has all the classic elements of a tragedy. It's got greed, it's got betrayal, it's got murder, and it tells you how swiftly you can be defeated if you're divided. Now, this story basically has a lot of protagonists, but we're going to focus on three people. Okay, the first person is the king. His name is Sri Vikrama Rajasinghe. The second person is the prime minister, the second in command of the kingdom, and they were called Maha Adhigars. And that person's name is Ahelapola. And the third person that we're going to be focusing on is the person whose grave I was standing at, John Doyley. Now, before I get into the story, I just want to tell any person who's watching this from Sri Lanka that if I'm messing up the names, I'm sorry, but I'm sincerely trying my best. Let's get into the story, and before I do, let's set the scene. Okay, we're in Kandy. This is Kandy with a K, and the kingdom of Kandy was established and rose to power in the 1500s. It's in the interior of Sri Lanka, in the middle. Okay, and this place is thickly forested and it's got a lot of mountains around it. The capital city of Kandy is surrounded by hills on the Kandy plateau. Now, this mountainous terrain formed a natural fortification for the kingdom. There were very few routes into the kingdom, and these routes were kept extremely secret. In fact, revealing these routes to anybody was punishable by death. Now, because of a few routes, it was easy to guard them. The terrain was so rugged that you could very successfully mount guerrilla warfare campaigns. And because of this, the kingdom of Kandy had been independent for 300 years. Despite the repeated and relentless efforts of the Portuguese and the Dutch in trying to conquer the kingdom, it had somehow remained autonomous. That was until 1815, when the British finally succeeded. And that is the story we're telling today. Our story starts with the last king of Kandy, the last king of Sri Lanka. Now, this guy wasn't even supposed to be the king. Okay, he was born as Kannaswamy. His mother was the previous king's mistress. And when the previous king died by falling off his elephant, it was a young 18-year-old, relatively uneducated Kannaswamy who found himself put on the throne. And his name changed to what the history books now know as Sri Vikrama Raja Singhe. The odds were stacked against the king right from the beginning. Okay, because although he was integrated in Sinhalese culture, he came from a dynasty which was called the Nayakar dynasty. Okay, now these guys were basically a dynasty of kings who came from South India. So he was already considered an outsider. Secondly, and more importantly, he was not put on the throne for any legitimate reason. He was put on the throne by the prime minister, the then prime minister of the kingdom of Kandy, the Mahadigar. His name was Pilimataluva, and he had installed this boy on the throne because he wanted a puppet that he could control and then eventually dispose of, so that he could then put a Sinhalese king on the throne. The Mahadigar Pilimataluva puts him on the throne, and very quickly this plan starts going badly, because this young king starts making independent decisions. He's nobody's puppet. What's worse, these decisions were against the nobles. So animosity starts developing between the king and the nobles. And the one person who's most pissed is Pilimataluva. So what he does is what anybody would do if they were bitter about the fact that their puppet king has grown a mind of his own. He goes and starts conspiring with the British. He starts telling them the secrets of the empire and tells them when they should attack. The British listen to Pilimataluva and they decide to mount an attack. They send 2 troops to Kandy. And this was a bad idea, because Pilimataluva had underestimated how much the people still supported the king, and the British had underestimated how dangerous the kingdom of Kandy could be. The British troops enter, and the forces of Kandy put up such a fierce battle through guerrilla warfare that the British just cannot keep up. Then the monsoon strikes, and with the monsoon comes disease, and disease rips through the British troops, and finally they're beaten and battered, and they start making a retreat. As they're retreating, the Kandyan forces, they intercept them and massacre them. Only 4 people lived to tell the tale. This decisive Kandyan victory happens in 1803. The king now has more power than he did before, and he's able to subdue the nobles even more. What happens to Pilimataluva for this? Well, he gets executed. The king has just won a decisive battle against the biggest imperial power of its time, and now he's got the nobles under his thumb. He's on a high. But he had to be careful, because history was going to repeat itself very, very soon. Because watching this Kandyan victory from afar was a man called John Doyley. John Doyley was the son of an archdeacon. He had studied in Cambridge, and then he became a civil servant. From the civil services, he finds his way to Ceylon, which was the English name for Sri Lanka. He comes to Ceylon, joins the civil services here as a revenue officer. But then he does something which is very strange for a civil servant. He finds a monk and he becomes his disciple. As a student of the monk, he starts learning Sinhalese, the language of the kingdom of Kandy and the language of Sri Lanka. He learns the customs and the culture. And he's an intelligent guy, a fast learner, and he becomes really proficient at it. In fact, he's so good at it that the documents of the time say that he was probably the one European who knew more Sinhalese than anybody else. Now, because of this proficiency, the government decides to give him a different post. The post they gave him was of chief translator. Now, chief translator sounds like a very useful position, And it sounds like a harmless position. Useful? It is. Harmless? It wasn't. Because when you translate chief translator, it means master of spies. That's what John Doyle was. In 1803, they had tried brute force, sending an army to conquer this place, and it had failed. So the British resorted to another tactic, a tactic that we in India know really well. The tactic was of divide and rule. And so begins John Doyle's decade-long mission to destabilize the Kandyan kingdom. So what he does is he starts collecting information. He's got a network of spies who are constantly feeding him stuff that's happening in the interior of the kingdom. Now, knowing Sinhalese, he starts befriending the nobles and finds out what issues they have with the king. Having found out the issues, he makes them bigger and bigger until he turns these dissatisfied nobles into rebellious ones. He's not just collecting information, he's also spreading misinformation. This guy was doing fake news 2 centuries before it was called that. He's trying to distort the image of the king. Okay, he tries to put word out that the king is a greedy, cruel, drunken womanizer. Now, all of this could be true, but it wasn't true to the extent that John Doyle tried to make it out to be. In addition to this, he's also gathering vital, strategic, tactical information, such as what are the routes into the kingdom and what are the details of the Kandyan forces. Now, all of these things that John Doyle was doing, they all came together when he finally befriended the new Maha Adigar, the Prime Minister of the kingdom. That man was Ahelapola. Ahelapola is the final nail in the coffin of the Kandyan Empire. He's a man of mysterious motives and probably the one person whose fate is the most tragic of all. He's our third and final protagonist. Ahelapola was the nephew of Pilimataluva, the man who had conspired with the British against the empire and had his head removed for his trouble. He was his nephew. And like I said, history was going to repeat itself. Because guess which Maha Adigar was conspiring with the British again? That's right, it was Ahelapola. What he does is he starts corresponding with John Doyle and starts passing on information. And again, like his uncle, starts urging the British to conquer Kandy. Now, the reasons he did this vary. Right? Some people say that he did this because he wanted to depose the Nayakar king and put a Sinhalese king on the throne. Some people say that he did it for the people of Kandy, to save them from this tyrannical ruler. And others say that he did this to become king himself. Whatever the reasons, Ahelapola is now conspiring with the British. He starts doing this, and then eventually the king finds out. The king found out about the betrayal when Ahelapola was away from the court. He was in his districts doing his duties. That's when the king finds out. And incensed, the king sends message to Ahelapola saying, "Come to the court and face up to your charges." Ahelapola knows that he's in grave danger. So instead of going to the court, he flees to Colombo and asks the British for protection. The king sends another message. He says, if you do not arrive at the court, then your family will pay the price. Ahelapola still doesn't come. What happens next goes down as in legend as the singular most gruesome event in Sri Lanka's history. It's an event so gruesome that probably even Game of Thrones wouldn't have shown it to you, and they've shown a lot of stuff. I'm going to tell you first the short version of events. And the short version of events are that the family was executed. The kids, the wife, everyone. That's the short version. And now I'm going to tell you the long version. And if you're eating food, I would suggest that you skip it. Because here's the long version. The family are brought to the executioners. And the elder boy is terrified. He's cowering. He's holding on to his mother. He knows what is imminent. That's when his younger brother, a boy who was not older than 10, steps forward and he turns to his brother and he says, "Brother, let me show you how to face death." And then he looks at the executioner and says, "Cut my head off in one single stroke." Now, this moment of bravery is immortalized in Sri Lankan history. In fact, if you go to this place called the Temple of the Sacred Tooth, you'll find a statue there of this boy urging his captors to execute him. The executioners did execute the boys, and they were beheaded, and their heads were then placed in a rice mortar, which is basically like a container where you grind rice. They were put in the mortar, and then the pounder was given to the mother, and she was told to pound her kids. As soon as she gets the pounder, she faints. And then eventually, she's taken to a lake, and a stone is tied around her neck, and she's drowned. When news of this broke, it stunned the kingdom of Kandy. No one lit a light in that entire kingdom for days. The only light that shone came from the palace of the tyrant king. Now, it's a gruesome anecdote. It's filled with gory details, images that you will not be able to shake out of your head, right? In fact, when you listen to it, you almost feel like it's a great thing that the British are coming and overthrowing this king. So you can imagine why it was that this version of events come to us from the British. No one else seems to mention it, but they were the ones who started this particular version of events. Regardless, the truth is that the family was executed, and when that happened, the other nobles in the area, they got jolted. They suddenly realized what could happen to them and what could happen to their families. And because of that, they rebelled openly. This was the moment that the British were waiting for. The British forces start entering the kingdom of Kandy. The king realizes that he's lost the support of the nobles, the support of the army, and because of that, the king flees. In 1803, the British had tried to just send an army and through brute force conquer this kingdom, and it had failed. Then, through machination and duplicity, in 1815, they finally managed to conquer the kingdom of Kandy, and not a single bullet was fired. The king is eventually caught. He was holed up in a house with his 2 queens. A mob goes to catch the king, and when they break open the door, the mob seizes the gold ornaments of the queens and rip them out of their earlobes. Blood spills on their clothes, and these clothes, these blood-spattered clothes, can still be seen in the Museum of Colombo. The king is brought to Kandy and forced, along with some other nobles, to sign a treaty which forfeited the kingdom to the British. Then, the king is banished. He's put on a ship and he's sent away to India. And he dies in relative anonymity in Vellore. Ahelapola thought that now that the king has been deposed, he will ascend to power. That didn't happen. The British had used him and now they cast him aside. All power was stripped from the nobles and the British seized control completely of the land. This eventually led the nobles to revolt, and a rebellion took place 2 years later. The British squashed that rebellion cruelly and mercilessly. After this rebellion, they basically thought that Ahelapola was also a part of this, which is why they banished him too. They send him to Mauritius, and Ahelapola dies a broken man, without a kingdom, without power, and most importantly, without his family. He sums all of this up by saying that he gave everything to a government that he trusted, and in return, all he got was a line drawn in water. Let's come to the last protagonist of our story, John Doyle, the man who worked for a decade to get this victory to happen, a man who succeeded beyond his ambitions, a person who was able to conquer a kingdom without a single loss to the British army. He should have had it better than the other two, and he kind of did. In 1816, he was made the chief administrator of Kandy. But then something strange starts happening to John Doyle. He becomes a recluse. because he had sympathy for the people of Kandy and he felt that the British would treat them better. But they didn't. He spent the last of his days in a plantation, and legend has it that he grew out his hair, used to walk around barefoot, and used to chew pan. The very culture that he sought to exploit had eventually swallowed him. Upon his death, they found out that he had been giving monthly stipends to 115 local needy people. John Doyley died without ever going back to England in 1824, and he was buried in the British Garrison Cemetery, where Harsha looks after his grave today. So that's the story of how the Kingdom of Kandy fell. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, then please leave a comment and a like. If there are other stories you would like me to cover, then also leave them in the comment below. As usual, this episode is brought to you by My Career. If you would like to support my career, then please check the links in the description below. If you're in Mumbai, I'll be performing on the 19th in the city. For tickets, you can check the description. And until next time, bye-bye.